Adam guided his students on their field trip. Deeper and deeper they went into the earth. Only a tiny sphere of light pushed back the darkness. Try as they might, none could hear anything but their footsteps. Then the tunnel opened into a wide cavern. Adam extended the sphere of light, but still it couldn't reach the furthest steps. In the far shadows, they could just make out figures moving. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, let's look at another trope we find in fiction. Not just in fantasy, but also science fiction. The hidden underground ecosystem. We have all seen it. Your adventurer is exploring a cave, going deeper and deeper, lost and on their last legs. No more food or water. Death is imminent. And then step into a cavern that's filled with life. We see it in Dungeons and Dragons with the Underdark, hidden enclaves in Dragon Age's deep roads, and of course in the legendary Jules Verne Journey to the Center of the Earth, where his explorers find a whole hidden sea filled with animals from the age of dinosaurs and even giants. So, could a place like this even exist? What kind of creatures? And what about the races that come from them? Now, do we have anything similar to this in our world? Well, there are cave ecosystems with animals that live there, but they aren't the same thing. Cave ecosystems have three main categories of animals. First is the troglobites, or cave livers, or animals which live their entire lives within the cave and never leave. These animals are usually blind, with a white or a pale pink color. They have enhanced their other sensory organs, mostly insects and worms, some amphibians, and a few others. Then we have the troglophiles, or cave lovers, animals which spend a great deal of their time in the cave, but often leave it. They will spend much of their time in the cave, but just as much away from it. This is mostly amphibians, insects, and a few others. And lastly, we have the troglozenas, or cave visitors. These will usually sleep in the cave and then leave. This includes bats and bears in hibernation. And they are important here. These cave ecosystems are completely dependent on those groups for bringing nutrients for the cave. All ecosystems require a producer of energy for most of the earth. That is from photosynthesis, which requires light to produce the energy to fund an ecosystem. Our troglozenas bring in nutrients, most of it in shit, but some with twigs and leaves brought in by animals or by running water. The troglobites and troglophiles eat and break down what they find. Mostly, they will be bacteria, mites, worms, and others from the bottom tier of the food chain. Then other animals will eat them and slowly move up the food chain. Now, food is rare here, and most animals will spend much of their time just searching for food or conserving energy. So, to create a subterranean ecosystem, it may need its own variant of troglozenas and troglophiles to bring in food. Bats, owlbears, giant spiders, and so forth. But there may be another option. The Haddle Zone. It is about 6 to 11 kilometers, 3.7 to 6.8 miles below the sea level, the deepest of the oceans. There is a process called chemosynthesis, where things like methane and carbon dioxide are used to produce energy. It is done by some bacteria, which live in the giant tube worms, or Riftia pachypatilla. And it is actually a type of mollusk, not a worm. They are found near thermal vents. This sounds good, except for a little factor. Much of the nutrients in these regions of the oceans come from other animals dying and their remains drifting down from above. So neither is perfect. But if we could perfect the chemosynthetic system, it might work. So we would need our Underdark ecosystem to be based around thermal vents, which isn't that challenging. It means being near volcanoes and fault lines, which aren't that hard to find, to be honest. So the primary producers would be the chemosynthetic bacteria, which would then either need a host species or be found in pools. From there, we would need things which prey on them, and we could move up the food chain. Now, often, you will see fantasy series include giant mushrooms in such places, and as of this time, there are no known chemosynthetic fungi, but there are radiotropic fungi, which are fungi which use radiation to produce food. So, in theory, it is possible, but they could also grow on anything that dies, which is more likely. Now, what sort of animals will we have there? Well, the first and most important question comes in light availability. In most cave ecosystems and the Hattle Zone, there is no light, total darkness, which would mean that the animals we find in such a place would be blind. But impressive hearing and sense of touch, a seismic sense is a possibility here. But in the Hattle Zone, we do get bioluminescence, glowing animals. These patches of flesh are used to communicate, signal others, and lure in prey. They aren't used for seeing. They are far too weak to tempt that. These animals have eyes which barely function, looking for movement, not color. Now, there is another factor to address: food availability. If food is scarce, it will limit which species you would find. Warm-blooded species struggle without constant food, which means cold-blooded species should flourish. So amphibians, insects, isopods, fish, and so forth. Reptiles are a maybe. With that, we can put together our food web. We have our bacteria and perhaps fungi at the base. If the bacteria don't have some form of tube worm equivalent to live in, then they would be found in thermal pools. Next up are mites, isopods, copepods, and other small animals which feed on them. They may be aquatic species. From there, we have our larger ones, crickets and predatory worms. And up from there are the larger ones, like amphibians, spiders, and so forth. Anything that is dead would be scavenged by anything. Most of the larger species would be omnivores and prey on anything that they could get. Earthworms and mushrooms would help break down anything dead. All of them would need to function on low food systems, which means they would likely be slow to preserve energy. Ambush predator attacks. They would likely congregate near the thermal vents and rarely venture too far. An island situation. This could result in those areas being dangerous, while the rest is barren and safe. Now, spiders make perfect sense here. They can set up a web and wait. Due to the low airflow, there is a low chance of their webs being damaged by a storm. Now, a common trope is ancient species being found in these subterranean ecosystems. Well, could it happen? There are plenty of species which have barely changed over millions of years. This includes crocodiles, coelacanth fish, and spiders. So, it would be possible? Cave systems are relatively stable. The temperature doesn't vary too much, assuming that there is enough room. Dinosaurs existing isn't impossible except for the light issue. Most surface species are adapted to light, not just for sight, but also for maintaining their health. So they would require a higher rate of light than most areas like the Underdark. If there was something generating much more light, it changes everything though. Lastly, we have the sentient races of the Underdark. Normally, groups of dwarves and dark elves and myconoids, or mushroom people. The last one would just require intelligent mushrooms, which is a bit of a jump, but the most feasible, I think. Yet, there are issues with life in these areas. If the light is limited, it will alter things like writing. Yes, of course, they could use bioluminescent ink for their writing eventually, but the initial idea of learning is more difficult. Living under such a condition would lead to improved hearing, and that would be their method of communication. Sound and music. A drum and horn system would work wonders for them. But that won't allow for recordings in their early civilization, and that could delay development of their history and culture. The ability to communicate using telepathy would definitely be valued here. Most predators would have incredible hearing, and the ability to communicate silently tips the balance heavily, and inevitably, they would contact the surface. And there is an issue. If you spent your whole life underground in the dark, what would happen when you first walk into the light? You'd get blinded, and it would be painful. It would take months, if not years, of slow exposure to the light before you could step onto the surface. There is a high chance that they would need to wear a heavy scarf or a mask over their eyes when they first reach the surface, and probably only go about at night, and will have the opposite problem for surface folk coming to visit. They may not be able to carry lanterns to see with them as they go about their visit. You would need night vision goggles or a dark vision spell. But there is another issue: sunburns. They are painful for us, but for someone who has never felt the sun, it'll be bad. They'll need to cover up. Now, the chances of them overheating is uncertain. If they get food from bacteria near thermal vents, they would build their cities near them, so they should have some tolerance to temperature variations. Yet that location would bring them into frequent contest with other species for food availability, similar to how a surface city is with water in a desert. Living in underground caverns would definitely have an impact on the sentient races, to be sure. The shadows advanced, and Adam called to them. His voice reverberated in the cave. His allies hurried to the source as he dimmed the light. Quickly, they began to speak and teach their ways. Before long, it was time to part, and the class offered gifts to their new subterranean friends. A subterranean ecosystem isn't that odd of an idea. Life has a tendency to spring up in the most unusual of places, and it just needs to find the right trick before it can happen. Though such a place would definitely influence those that live there. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time for a deep dive into merfolk anatomy. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.